The idea that you can change your DNA may sound like science fiction. For most of the last century, we believed DNA was a fixed code, one that you inherited at birth and carried with you unaltered for the rest of your life. But that's only part of the story. What we've now come to understand is that while the sequence of your DNA may not change significantly over time, the expression of that DNA, the way your cells read and interpret your genetic code, is remarkably dynamic. And here's the key point: that expression can be influenced and even directed by your daily habits. What this means is that your decisions, what time you wake up, whether or not you get sunlight, how you breathe, how you train your body, what you eat, how you sleep are actually inputs into the cellular machinery that determines which parts of your DNA are turned on and which remain silent. This is the science of epigenetics, and today we're going to talk about how simple behaviors executed consistently can lead to long-term biological changes that impact your mood, your energy levels, your cognitive capacity, and even your resilience to disease. Let's start with light. Light is the most powerful regulator of the circadian system, which governs everything from your hormone release to your metabolism to your immune function. The timing and type of light you are exposed to can flip genetic switches in your brain and body. Every morning, when you wake up, there is a narrow window of opportunity, ideally within the first 30 to 60 minutes, when exposure to natural sunlight can anchor your biological clock. The light enters your eyes, activates retinal ganglion cells, and signals a brain region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which in turn triggers a cascade of gene expression events. These genes control cortisol rhythms, which play a central role in alertness, immune readiness, and metabolism. Missing that window, especially if you instead wake up and spend your first hours under dim indoor lighting, delays this gene expression and leads to a misalignment of your internal systems. Over time, this misalignment increases your risk for anxiety, depression, insulin resistance, and even cardiovascular problems. But the fix is free and simple. Get 5 to 10 minutes of sunlight in the morning. If it's cloudy, double that time. If you live in a place where natural light is limited, a 10-000 lux light box can be an effective substitute. Now let's talk about movement. Physical activity is not just about aesthetics or weight loss. It is one of the most potent levers you can pull to change your biochemistry at the genetic level. Every time you engage in moderate, when tense physical activity, you trigger the release of a molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. Think of BDNF as miracle, grow for your brain. It supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new ones. More importantly, exercise activates a class of genes called immediate early genes. These genes act like switches that prepare the cell to respond to new stimuli that make your body and brain more adaptable, more resilient. The type of movement matters less than the consistency. Resistance training, aerobic exercise, even walking, if done regularly, lead to beneficial shifts in DNA methylation, which is one of the key mechanisms through which your gene expression is altered. Interestingly, high-intensity interval training here, it has been shown to reverse some age-related changes in gene expression. In one study, older adults who participated in HIIT protocols showed gene expression patterns similar to those of much younger individuals. There's also an often overlooked way to change gene expression through movement: cold exposure. When you deliberately expose yourself to cold, whether through cold showers, ice baths, or simply going outside underdressed for short periods, you activate cold shock proteins and stress response pathways. These pathways upregulate genes associated with fat metabolism, cellular repair, and neuroprotection. In essence, controlled cold stress acts like a genetic tune-up for your system. The same is true of heat exposure. Saunas, for example, increase the expression of heat shock proteins, which assist in protein folding, protect against neurodegeneration, and enhance overall cellular health. Let's now shift to breathwork. Your breathing is a direct line to your autonomic nervous system. Most people assume their stress levels are dictated by external circumstances, but in reality, you can modulate your internal state, and therefore your physiology, by learning to control your breath. One particularly effective tool is physiological sighing, 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a slow exhale through the mouth. Just 1 or 2 rounds of this breathing pattern can shift your nervous system from sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic rest and digest, effectively calming you down. And when this becomes a daily practice, it doesn't just influence your mood. It alters the expression of genes associated with inflammation and immune regulation. Regular breathwork has been shown to reduce levels of interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, both of which are markers of chronic inflammation that contribute to aging and disease. Nutrition, of course, is another critical input. What you eat is not just fuel. It is information, literal biochemical code that signals to your cells how to behave. Certain nutrients, like omega-3 fatty acids, polyphenols, and fiber, interact with your DNA through molecular pathways like the NRF2 pathway or sirtuin pathways, which regulate oxidative stress and longevity. For example, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and kale contain sulforaphane, which has been shown to influence gene expression involved in detoxification and inflammation. Fermented foods such as kimchi, yogurt, and kefir not only support gut microbiota diversity, but also indirectly modulate gene expression via the gut-brain axis. On the flip side, ultra-processed foods, those loaded with synthetic additives, refined sugars, and industrial oils, create a pro-inflammatory state that turns on genes associated with metabolic disease, neurological disorders, and immune dysfunction. So every meal you eat is not just shaping your waistline, it's shaping your future at the level of your cells. Let's also talk about sleep. Sleep is the master reset. During deep sleep, there is a global downscaling of synaptic strength, which is crucial for memory consolidation and emotional regulation. But more interestingly, specific phases of sleep correspond to waves of gene expression. Certain genes only turn on during sleep, especially those related to DNA repair, hormone synthesis, and neuroplasticity. Skimping on sleep doesn't just make you tired, it literally downregulates the expression of genes that keep you healthy. And even partial sleep deprivation can upregulate genes linked to stress, inflammation, and even cancer. The good news is that restoring proper sleep hygiene, consistent sleep and wake times, avoiding blue light at night, and reducing caffeine in the late afternoon can reverse these effects. Even after just a few nights of good sleep, your body begins to shift back toward a gene expression profile associated with optimal health. Now let's consider mental habits. Gratitude, for instance, is not just a feel-good emotion. Studies show that regularly practicing gratitude activates the brain's reward circuitry and increases dopamine availability, but more profoundly, it alters the expression of genes in immune cells, reducing inflammatory markers and enhancing cellular resilience. In one study, individuals who wrote about things they were grateful for just 3 times a week showed measurable changes in gene expression related to immune function and stress regulation. Similarly, meditation and mindfulness practices have been linked to epigenetic changes in genes that regulate inflammation, telomere maintenance, and neuroplasticity. It's not about sitting cross-legged for hours. Even short, consistent mindfulness sessions, 5 to 10 minutes per day, and alter your biology in ways that make you more adaptive, more focused, and less reactive. Social connection is another key piece. Loneliness has been shown to upregulate pro-inflammatory gene expression while downregulating antiviral defenses. In contrast, meaningful relationships, those characterized by trust, safety, and shared purpose, create a biochemical milieu that supports healthy gene expression. So while diet, exercise, and sleep are often emphasized, we shouldn't ignore the epigenetic power of community, connection, and even physical touch. What's remarkable is how these interventions work synergistically. Morning sunlight not only sets your circadian clock, it also increases dopamine, which makes it easier to stick to your movement routine. Exercise increases BDNF, which enhances learning and makes meditation more effective. Meditation lowers cortisol, improving your sleep quality. Better sleep resets your emotional baseline and makes you more likely to eat healthfully. These feedback loops are powerful, and once you get even a few of them running in parallel, your biology begins to shift in noticeable ways. Now, to be clear, none of these tools are magic bullets, but when layered together and practiced with consistency, they initiate a biological cascade that rewires your system. They don't just change how you feel in the moment, they literally change what your cells do. And over time, these changes accumulate. They become the new baseline from which your body operates. There's a concept in neuroscience known as metaplasticity, which refers to the brain's ability to change its own capacity for change. In other words, the more you engage in these positive behaviors, the more your body adapts to support them. Your cells become more efficient, your systems align, your DNA begins to favor expression patterns that promote health, clarity, and resilience. You are not stuck with the genetic hand you were dealt. You are, at every moment, in a conversation with your biology. Every habit you adopt or discard is a signal. And over time, those signals write the script of your life, not in theory, but in the language of molecules, proteins, and gene expression. If you want to feel better, think better, and live longer, you don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to start giving your body the right inputs: sunlight, movement, breath, sleep, real food, connection, gratitude. These are not luxuries. They are instructions. Instructions your DNA is waiting for. The most extraordinary part of this process is not that it works. It's that it works for anyone, no matter your age, background, or current health status. Your system is designed to respond to these cues. Your body wants to heal. Your brain wants to grow. Your DNA is not your destiny, it is your potential, and the daily habits you choose are the key to unlocking it. Every choice you make in a 24-hour cycle has ripple effects that extend far beyond what you can immediately feel. Whether you decide to scroll your phone under artificial light late into the night, or whether you take 10 deep nasal breaths before bed, both decisions inform your physiology and in turn influence how your genes behave the next day. This is the silent communication happening between your behaviors and your biology. Most people go through life unaware of this conversation, unaware that their micro decisions are providing real-time instructions to their nervous system, their immune system, and their endocrine system. But once you understand that this communication exists, you begin to realize that your body is listening all the time. Let's talk more about stress and how it interplays with gene expression. Chronic psychological stress is not just a mental state, it's a biological signal that alters gene transcription. It amplifies the expression of genes associated with inflammation and simultaneously suppresses genes involved in viral defense. This means chronic stress actually makes you more vulnerable to physical illness, and this isn't theoretical. There are documented molecular pathways showing how stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline affect the nucleus of cells and shift their behavior. But again, the solution isn't out of reach. Techniques such as deliberate breathing, regular physical exertion, grounding, and mindful attention to the body's internal state, what's called interoception, can all attenuate stress responses at the epigenetic level. In fact, in longitudinal studies, individuals who learned and consistently practiced stress regulation techniques had not only lower reported levels of stress, but exhibited epigenetic profiles consistent with lower systemic inflammation. Even more interestingly, many of these changes persisted even after stressful life events, meaning that their bodies became more resilient over time. The implication is clear: managing stress isn't just about reducing discomfort in the moment, it's about shaping the long-term trajectory of your cellular health. Let's take a closer look at the relationship between intentional adversity and biological change. When we deliberately engage in actions that are difficult, that require discipline or even discomfort, like fasting, high-intensity training, or cold exposure, we activate pathways that increase our body's capacity for adaptation. These challenges trigger cellular stress responses that, paradoxically, make us stronger. A phenomenon called hormesis explains this. A small dose of stress, when applied intermittently and appropriately, causes an adaptive overcompensation that enhances resilience. At the molecular level, hormetic stress induces expression of antioxidant genes, longevity, promoting sirtuins and mitochondrial biogenesis. Fasting, for example, is not just about caloric restriction. When the body enters a fasted state, certain genes that remain dormant in the presence of frequent food intake become active. These include genes associated with autophagy, the process through which your body clears out damaged cells and regenerates new ones. It's a kind of cellular housekeeping that only gets triggered under the right conditions. Regular, well-timed fasting has also been shown to influence insulin sensitivity and gene networks involved in fat metabolism. This is why timing your food intake, also known as time-restricted eating, can have outsized effects on metabolic health and longevity. There's also a profound connection between attention and biology. Where you place your focus affects your physiology. When you sustain your attention on a task, especially one that involves effort, you release norepinephrine and acetylcholine, which sharpen your awareness and prime your neurons for plasticity. Plasticity is the nervous system's ability to rewire itself, to change in response to experience. But plasticity is gated by neuromodulators. Without the right chemical conditions, effort alone won't change the brain. This means that focus isn't just a productivity tool. It's a biological switch that allows for reprogramming of neural circuits. And over time, consistent focus on constructive habits rewires not only how your brain functions, but how it influences gene expression in supporting cells like astrocytes and microglia. Now, let's revisit sleep from a molecular perspective. During slow-wave sleep, the glymphatic system becomes active, a network responsible for clearing metabolic waste from the brain. One of the byproducts it removes is beta amyloid, a protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. But what's even more fascinating is that this system relies on circadian control, which means that if your sleep is misaligned with your circadian rhythm, say, you go to bed at wildly inconsistent times or you work night shifts, it interferes with this cleanup process. That in turn leads to long-term shifts in gene expression associated with neurodegeneration. On the flip side, getting quality deep sleep boosts the expression of genes responsible for neural repair, learning, and hormonal balance. In this way, sleep is a nightly opportunity for your biology to restore and recalibrate. It is your body's most powerful and underused tool for DNA protection. Let's examine the impact of social and emotional experiences. The human nervous system is profoundly shaped by relational context. Interactions with other people, whether positive or negative, trigger cascades of neuromodulators like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and cortisol. These aren't just fleeting mood effects. They are molecular signals that influence immune function and gene expression. Positive, nurturing social interactions, particularly those that involve physical touch or shared emotion, enhance the activity of genes associated with immune surveillance and cellular repair. In contrast, social isolation or chronic conflict increases expression of pro-inflammatory genes and suppresses antiviral gene programs. This is not just about loneliness. It's about how your body prepares for survival in a hostile environment. When you feel unsupported, your biology shifts into a state of defense. When you feel connected and safe, your biology shifts into a state of growth. One of the most powerful modifiers of gene expression is the narrative you hold about yourself. Studies have shown that mindset, your beliefs about your own abilities, your sense of purpose, your perception of agency, affects genetic markers of health and resilience. For example, individuals who view stress as a challenge rather than a threat exhibit different physiological responses. Lower cortisol, more adaptive immune responses, and more efficient return to baseline after stress. These shifts are reflected at the genetic level with altered expression in stress-related genes. The way you interpret your life, therefore, is not just philosophical, it's biochemical. There's also compelling evidence that meditation, especially compassion-based or loving, kindness meditation, can influence gene networks tied to inflammation, telomere maintenance, and circadian regulation. Just a few weeks of consistent practice has been associated with increased expression of genes that protect cellular integrity. Telomeres, which are the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, shorten with age and stress. But people who engage in regular contemplative practices often show slower telomere shortening, suggesting a molecular buffering effect. This shows us that practices which enhance psychological well-being don't just make you feel better, they slow the aging process at the cellular level. Nature exposure is another tool that often goes unrecognized. Simply spending time in natural environments, forests, mountains, near bodies of water, lowers stress hormones and shifts autonomic tone toward parasympathetic dominance. But beyond these immediate effects, consistent exposure to natural light, natural sounds, and natural air quality has been linked to epigenetic shifts in genes related to inflammation and immune readiness. Forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku, practiced in Japan, has been shown to increase natural killer cell activity and beneficial gene expression for up to a week following a single outing. We should also talk about the idea of identity-based habits. When you change what you do, you change who you become, not just psychologically, but biologically. The more you act in accordance with the person you want to become, the more your brain reinforces those actions through neural and genetic mechanisms. This is why repetition is so powerful. Every repetition of a healthy behavior reinforces the underlying neural circuit. It also teaches your cells that this behavior is part of your identity, part of your survival pattern, and your biology adapts accordingly. This is how small habits become biological traits. Now, when people hear about genetic change, they often assume it must take years, but that's not the case. Some changes in gene expression can occur within hours of implementing a new behavior. Others, such as those related to neuroplasticity or immune shifts, may take days or weeks. What matters most is not how long you've been doing something, but how consistently you do it. Biology loves rhythm. Cells are time-sensitive, and they respond best to repeated, regular input. That's why even modest actions, when practiced daily, have the power to reshape your internal landscape. What's equally important is how we approach failure in habit formation. From a biological standpoint, effort is not wasted. Even if you attempt a habit and fall short, the intention and the neural activation associated with effort are recorded by your brain. There are glial cells in the nervous system, astrocytes and oligodendrocytes, that respond to effortful behavior by supporting neural insulation and increasing efficiency of the related pathways. In plain terms, trying makes the doing easier next time. So if you've ever felt like you're failing to make progress, remember, your nervous system is listening, your genes are listening, and the consistent attempt, even without perfection, is moving the needle. One of the most beautiful aspects of all this is that these tools are accessible. You don't need to buy a product, join an exclusive club, or rely on perfect circumstances. The sunlight is free, breath is free, movement is free, connection is free, and the impact of these actions is more profound than most pharmaceuticals. That's not to dismiss the importance of medicine, but rather to emphasize that the foundation of health, the groundwork of your biological resilience, is built through daily, conscious behaviors. When you understand how behavior translates into biology, you stop seeing habits as chores. They become opportunities. Every glass of water you drink, every time you choose to go outside, every minute spent in intentional rest. These are not random acts. They are deliberate inputs that speak directly to your DNA. And while you can't change the sequence of the genes you were born with, you can absolutely change the way those genes operate. You can decide what kind of energy they generate, what kind of cells they support, and what kind of body and brain you live inside of. The greatest misconception people carry is that change must come from the outside, from a new job, a new city, a new relationship, but the truth is, the most powerful change starts from within. It starts at the level of your cells, and it starts with the smallest of habits. You are a living system, constantly shaped by your environment, your choices, your mindset, and your behavior. Every moment, you are either reinforcing the biology of stagnation or the biology of transformation. And when you begin to make these choices consciously, consistently, and with purpose, you awaken a version of yourself that isn't waiting to be discovered. It's waiting to be built in essence. Changing your DNA isn't about rewriting your genetic code, it's about influencing how that code is expressed through the habits you cultivate every day. Your biology is remarkably responsive to the environment you create for it, and with deliberate, consistent actions, whether through movement, breath, sleep, mindset, or connection, you hold the power to shape your genetic destiny. This process requires patience and persistence, but it's within everyone's reach. When you embrace these simple yet profound habits, you don't just change your body or your health, you transform your very being at the deepest biological level. Future version of yourself, the one you aspire to be, is already within your reach, ready to emerge through the power of your choices today.